Get over there. Are you hiding from me? Are you hiding from me, Paul? Oh, you're muted, bro. And I didn't mute you this time. It's not my fault this time.
No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. There's that reload button, buddy.
It is that reload button.
Yeah, it gets you. Gets me every time.
Like
What's up, everybody? Happy Bills playoff football.
Yes, we are going to get to that. Obviously, I have on the board the Bills Patriots recap. It sucked, and we're done with that. Yeah. That's the recap we're going to do. Yeah. We have to do the MVP, obviously the title of the episode. Obviously, you guys can find all of our socials, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All episodes will be on iTunes and Spotify. Paul, I have my sign up here.
Yeah. I don't know what that means.
Level 12 complete. And I wanted to surprise Paul on the air tonight because I wouldn't tell him what it was. I wasn't going to tell him what it was. Paul has conveniently wrote down the consecutive number starts for Joshua Patrick Allen in the Bills era. He has started consecutive, including playoffs, 115 games.
I get it now.
In a row. What is it?
It's Jim Kelly's consecutive starts. That Kelly had 114 consecutive starts?
No. What level 12 complete means that you and I have watched 194 Bills games as hashtag sports as a channel.
Oh, really?
And have done a podcast / YouTube channel for 12 years now, 12 seasons.
Okay.
That's 12 off seasons. That's 12 years covering this team that only won 30 games in the first 4 years that we covered the team.
Yeah, that was tough.
And the tough things that we had to go through for that, Paul. 194 games. That's a lot more than Josh Allen's been here, guys.
Yeah.
So we have been through it, but this is our 12th season that we have successfully completed, covering almost 200 games that the Bills have played, Paul. Isn't that insane?
It's a long time, man. Now, again, we've jumped around from platform to platform because we just simply didn't know what we were doing. You know? Yeah. We had no idea what we were doing. But hey, we appreciate you all being here. Thanks so much.
There's people that jump from content creator to content creator in the Bills circle.
Just homie hopping content creator. Let's not go down that road, shall we? Let's not go down that. We're here, and obviously we've added. We had Tommy and Mike, and now their channel's doing great. They were here with us for a little bit, and now we've got Ryan and Joe, and I love the guys that we've had around us at hashtag. We appreciate you guys for being here. The chat is on fire. And no Bengals. Looks like no Bengals, everybody. We're a Burrow-free zone.
We are a Burrow-free zone. I mean, I put this up before the show. Dolphins, Broncos, and Bengals. Oh, my. It seemed like, obviously, when you guys see this or you listen to this, you're going to know that the Denver Broncos are on the radar for the Buffalo Bills, obviously presenting a very unique matchup for the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, 10th in scoring offense and 5th in scoring defense. Very, very impressive numbers. However, you have to factor in that they've played Cleveland, that they've played the Raiders, that they've played the Jets. It's funny too, when I was going down their schedule, lost to like almost every playoff team. Lost to the Bucks, lost to the Steelers, lost to the Ravens, lost to the Chiefs. They lost to the Chargers, and they just recently lost to the Bengals in overtime, which is a game we were all watching. Where I was like, what are they doing? Literally, what are they doing? But it seems like it's going to be the opponent for the Buffalo Bills in the first round of Super Wildcard Weekend. Paul, what are your thoughts on the Broncos overall from what you've seen this year? Obviously, a rookie quarterback coming in with Bo Nix, Sean Payton, who I don't think anybody likes. It's just interesting to see. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so they use 3 backs, right? They want to run the football, and they've got a very mobile quarterback in Bo Nix who really likes to move around a lot. Made some great throws tonight against Kansas City already. And, listen, I talked about this with Joe during the halftime show. There's a big difference between the Bengals and the Broncos in respect to the Bengals can, they're a very talented team. So you can't out talent the Bengals, right? You can out talent the Broncos. Yeah, you can out talent them. The downside is you have a very accomplished coach in Sean Payton who 100% is fully aware of how to attack a team in the playoffs. So, Denver does some things that are dangerous for you. They love to run the football. They've got a mobile quarterback that can break contain. Buffalo has had some trouble with that. So Denver is not a layup for you, right? Like Joe and I were talking about it at halftime. Like I'd much prefer to get Miami. I'd be honest with you, much prefer to get Miami, but that looks like it's not going to be an option at this point. So the Broncos are not a layup. I mean, you have to take them seriously because they do some things that Buffalo won't do. Now, the opposite side of that is Bo Nix is not going to throw for 300 yards on you, right? He's not going to go 340, 350. That's not their style.
Combined, he might with his legs too.
Right. If you're talking overall yardage, different story.
Right? Yes.
Different story. But I think the idea is you pull them into deep water. Like you put them down scores early, and then you just because their offense will eat itself when they have to try and play catch up.
Yeah, Bo Nix has as many rushing touchdowns as Javonte Williams does. I mean, they use him. They use his mobility to their full advantage. And like you said, it was interesting though what you said. You said you pull him into deep waters early. Isn't that the kind of like the theme of what Buffalo has been trying to do the entire year with certain teams?
Absolutely,
that they face. They're like, listen, if we can get up and we get a lead, I don't care how many rushing yards you give up. I really don't care. But the thing is, like you said, the three-headed monster that Denver imposes on you could be something where that's what they want to do. They want to try to control the clock and keep 17 off the field, which is not a bad strategy when you think about it, when you have a rookie quarterback. And like you said, Sean Payton is not a rookie coach. He's not going to be bullied or intimidated or in any way, despite personal feelings that certain people have about Sean Payton. He can get his team ready for the playoffs, and he has done it in the past. And he has gone up against juggernauts and beat them. So I think with Vance Joseph's defense, the strength that they have is in their corners. And with an offense that up for a majority of the year that's had trouble getting separation, how does Joe Brady scheme up against that? You know what I mean? How does he go up against that and prove to be successful? Now, with the last meeting the Bills had with Denver, it was the 12-man thing with the field goal. But the previous meeting before that, they torched Denver, didn't they?
So I want to, again, bring up, to me, the most important thing here is Buffalo remains undefeated at home this season.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah. Buffalo's undefeated at home. The elements aren't going to be an issue here. The elements aren't going to be an issue here. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, you're playing Denver. So if there's a team that's just as accustomed to this, it's them. That I don't think that's really an issue. With all that being said, right, Vance Joseph, former head coach of the Denver Broncos. Isn't that weird? Can you recall a time where a former head coach returns to be a D coordinator? I don't know if I can think of an example.
Who's the coach? McCarthy. McCarthy was on Ray Rhodes' staff in Green Bay and then came back to be the head coach at Green Bay after that.
Okay.
Well, you asked me of an instance, and I gave you one.
Okay.
It was more than 20 years ago, so I apologize. You may go ahead.
Wow. It's one of those things. But it
is interesting. It is very interesting.
Denver's defense doesn't scare me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think Vance Joseph has done a good job keeping them competitive, but their defense doesn't really scare me.
Surtain doesn't scare you on the outside?
No, not really. Here's why. Buffalo runs so many routes. I just don't really believe that, you're going to be able to cover everybody, right? Like that's what Buffalo does is they just want to put everybody on the field that can catch a football. They run so many routes, dude. Like they don't waste a single route ever. So that's why I'm just not really super concerned about that. And for the last few weeks, Buffalo's kept things pretty close to the vest. So, like, I still don't know if teams really know what Buffalo plans to do with Amari Cooper in the coming weeks because he's been hurt, right? He's come back from being hurt, and then he was inactive today. I still don't know if Buffalo's really shown their hand with how they're going to leverage Cooper, because you want to talk about a game changer. I mean, Amari Cooper's your game changer. Keon Coleman got a lot of looks today, and again has some rookie problems, right? Some focus issues I think you saw today, but it's just one of those things that you just got to fight through. Now, does Buffalo, I think, have an advantage because the tape isn't as much? Denver's giving you everything. They're showing you, they're putting it all on the table tonight against Kansas City. Their season's on the line. So they're going to show you everything that they think they can do to execute. And, that's awesome if you're Buffalo, right? Like, that's awesome for you because Buffalo's kind of been in coast mode the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking just probably from the statistical standpoint at what the Buffalo Bills offer and what, like, obviously James Cook finally went over 1,000 yards this year, and that was very impressive. But there's not 1,000-yard rusher for Denver. There's not 1,000-yard receiver for Denver. Neither is there for the Bills.
Right.
Could the fact that these two offenses, where there's not really one guy you can key on. I don't think there's one guy, because I don't think Nix has developed a lot of those tendencies yet. Does he have tendencies already? Yes, he does. But I don't think he has a lot of those where I don't think he's completely locked into Sutton. Like for everything, like for everything that's going on. I think he'll dump it off. He'll take the check downs. He'll do things that are easy. And Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, has done a wonderful job with him, with Sean Payton, but he has experience with Payton down in New Orleans. So, I mean, that track record proves itself. But as far as the other side of the ball, the fact that you talk about the Buffalo Bills playing things close to the vest, you don't really know what they're going to do with Cooper. I don't think they would even show that in a game against Denver. I think they would feel confident enough that they could say, listen, we could drop 40 on this defense. But we have to drop the 14 before they score any points. So, like you said, if you try to get out to a boat race, Nix coming from behind in Buffalo, albeit similar type of weather conditions that they're used to, I don't think that he would be able to overcome that, especially when the Buffalo Bills defense is playing tailor-made how they want to play. And you have to throw against them. Is Sean Payton, being as seasoned as he is he a guy who's patient enough to stick with the run?
Well, let me ask you this, right? So let's go to the coin toss of the game, right? You're Denver. Let's imagine you win the coin toss. Do you take the ball or do you take the win?
If you're Denver?
Yeah. Can you give Buffalo the ball first?
No.
I don't think so either.
No.
Right? I can't imagine a scenario where you're happy with, taking the possession at halftime. I don't believe that.
No, it's tough because what Peyton has done in the past, now you have to announce it for an outside kick. And before, remember the Super Bowl when he
I remember. I remember.
We're going to call ambush. Let's go. And you can't do that no more. So that's taken off the table for him. So he would be fine receiving the ball in the first half if you can ambush him in the second, but he can't do that no more. I think he feels that he has a script. Him and Lombardi can come up with a script that would control the first drive for about 8 to 9 minutes to give the first, they came to play today, to the Buffalo Bills. And I think that would be a very, very tough thing for the Buffalo Bills to try to overcome 3 or 4 years ago. I think this team is so much more seasoned. By the way, did you happen to see the shot that Archuleta threw at Stephon Diggs?
No.
When he was talking about Allen's growth and success this year, he goes, yeah, well, he's just not force feeding it to one guy. That's why. And then he goes, yeah, Stephon Diggs demanded the ball a lot in that offense. And I was like, oh my God, dude is on the couch at home. Leave him alone. What the heck, dude?
Let's 15 rushing touchdowns this year. Let's
What's
just
that?
ignore that fact.
Ignore what?
Let's just ignore the fact that James Cook had like 15 rushing touchdowns this season. Come on.
16, right? He ended up with 16.
Well, he did get 16. Yeah, he did get number 16. But that's what I mean, right? Like that's production that last year you didn't get from James Cook. James Cook was still fumbling the football as of last year. All right. That's been a big thing that people aren't talking about. James Cook had a super high turnover ratio based off of total number of touches, right? And Josh did too. Josh put the ball on the ground an awful lot compared to the number of times that he rushed it. And those are things that this year, not a factor. But the ghost is still in, that skeleton is still in the closet. Like at some point, that could come out, and then all of a sudden it's every Bills fan's worst fear because you haven't seen this all season, but it's all too familiar, right? Just because you haven't seen it in 17 weeks doesn't mean that it doesn't exist anymore. So, there's still some ghosts of Christmas past that are there that I think Bills fans have right to be concerned with. With that being said, transformative season by Josh Allen, right? Absolutely transformative. Yeah. And, when Mac Hollins can come in and compete, right? And we bagged on Mac Hollins so bad, right? We bagged on him so bad because, you also had Chase Claypool here. Chase Claypool is somebody I think most people just go, oh, that's right. I forgot Chase Claypool was even on this team at the start of the season, and the Bills had only 4 wide receivers active today. Perfect. That's great. Give those guys routes. Give Curtis Samuel routes. Give Keon Coleman more routes. Give Mac Hollins more routes. Good. Go get it. Right. So what is Buffalo's plan against Denver? I think Buffalo is going to be perfectly happy letting Denver try and milk time off the clock. And Buffalo's plan is to score in 4 plays. But, just give it right back to them. That's it. Just go ahead, give it right back to them. Now, with that being said, Buffalo's defense isn't deep enough to be able to deal with multiple 7 and 8 minute drives. I think Peyton knows that, right?
Yes.
I think most of the NFL is probably pretty aware of that Buffalo's gas tank on the defensive side of the football, they're not going to be able to hold up to multiple 7 and 8 minute drives. They're not going to be able to do it. Even 5 and 6 minute sustained drives back to back. That's something that is definitely a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. No question. I mean, that'd be a big deal for any defense to try to, overcome. And with the injuries that are mounting, obviously, Milano came back. He's a little bit banged up. Bernard, he's a little banged up. I think they just gave Christian Benford a rest because they're like, listen, you're one of the best cornerbacks in the league that the league didn't even acknowledge. Mm-hmm. I think that was ridiculous, the fact that guy was left off the Pro Bowl, which furthers my point. The Pro Bowl is a joke. It's an absolute joke show of how does James Cook not make it leading the league in rushing touchdowns?
Because there's a lot that goes into the Pro Bowl that the Pro Bowl may not matter to us at this point, right? Because you look at it like the Ravens had like 9 players in the Pro Bowl, and you're like, well, okay, but Lamar's the MVP. It's just one of those. It's just one of those circumstances where the Pro Bowl may actually, because again, reminding everyone how the Pro Bowl is voted on, right? It is not solely football people who vote on the MVP, right?
Is it
not solely football people that do that. So with that being said, something like the Pro Bowl does put a different window dressing on the argument for Josh Allen as MVP, because Lamar has 9 Pro Bowlers on the team this year, right? And is he doing more with less? So he took 100 less offensive snaps than Allen. Certainly after today, like that gap widened, right? And, and then, the fact that he's got so many Pro Bowlers on the team when Allen has him and Dawkins, and that's it, right? Am I missing anybody?
The Pro Bowl missed a lot of people because there was the way that Christian Benford played this season.
The pick numbers weren't there. You know that's how corners get picked.
I understand that, but we're gonna go down so many rabbit holes because my mind goes in like 16 different directions. But like Benford was drafted the same year you drafted Elam. So is Elam a wasted pick when you got a first round corner out of it? You still got a first round corner out of it. Is it really that way? Switch their draft positions. Is it bad now? Is it a bad pick now? Is it a bad pick now?
I mean,
You had 4 years of
Benford.
Yeah.
You don't.
No, you don't get a 5th-year option, but you had 4 years at a cheaper deal at much higher play rate. So you wasted a few bucks on Elam. It doesn't matter. No, I'm just saying. Like, they were both drafted. That's why I don't really get down on Elam so much at pick, and I just leave it alone. But spoiler alert, Paul. Bo Nix is 26 for 29 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns.
That's fine. He's
playing against the JV Kansas City squad.
Against the JV Chiefs. That's fine. I do want to point out, because John Calvin brings up a great point. Aaron Cromer had Spiller get 6 yards a carry and Jackson 5+. Like, don't get me wrong, right? But how does, admittedly one of the best offensive lines in football, when you look at, I understand Josh Allen avoids sacks, right? Like, I understand that's part of his MO.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, right? But how can you look at the leading touchdown running back in the league and you put Dawkins on the Pro Bowl end of list, right? Like, that just doesn't sit right with me. That offensive line has performed to a totally different level than that level of recognition. And it's just, it's just unfair. Like, again, there may be Bills players that end up playing in the Pro Bowl that weren't voted to the Pro Bowl. You know how this stuff goes. As teams go into the playoffs and how all that shakes out, right? Like, the whole idea is Josh Allen and Deion Dawkins aren't going to play in the Pro Bowl. That's the hope. Right?
Yeah,
the hope is
absolutely.
They don't play in it.
Yeah, and it's one of it. It's a very quiet line. I don't remember, other than Deion Dawkins and a lot of his exploits throughout the year, the trash talking and a bunch of other things. You don't hear anything from the Bills' offensive line. You don't hear a word. I mean, okay, if you're doing like a local piece on, Spencer Brown or something, and how he's developed this year, that's fine. But you don't hear anything. There's nothing controversial going on. There's nothing to move the needle about the Buffalo Bills offensive line. Everything's all about Allen. And I think it works twofold in the fact that he's accepted that responsibility onto himself, being a quarterback, a franchise quarterback of a team. Like, listen, I will take all of the attention off of all of you guys, so you guys could do your jobs. So there's no pressure on you guys. It's all on me. If something happens, it's on me. I'm willing to shoulder all of that, because I think unfairly Allen gets too much credit sometimes when this line has performed absolutely beautifully. I mean, you can't have 12 rushing touchdowns as a quarterback and have 16 for your running back and have as much rushing yards as you had. Without this line just completely steamrolling people.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think I know, right? Old takes exposed. Thanks, Tim. We don't run away. We don't delete tweets.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, we don't delete tweets.
Well, Twitter did when we torpedoed our Twitter.
You torpedoed our Twitter.
When I torpedoed our Twitter. Yeah, that's
fine. But with all that being said, I think there's also a part of playing offensive line that when you look at Josh's rushing numbers, right? A lot of times this season, Josh was able to step forward into the pocket because of the lanes they were able to create, right?
Yes.
He wasn't just escaping to the outside and running for his life. There were multiple times this season, which again is different from Josh's previous seasons, where there were so many lanes inside the pocket as the pocket degraded that he was able to step forward and take yardage up the middle. And that was something that was different than the Josh Allen we've seen from previous seasons, where there were a ton of designed runs. Now, mind you, the homeboy broke his hand a couple times this season, so it might be why there weren't, a lot of Josh Allen designed runs. But the fact of the matter is, as the pocket was degrading and as 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, he was able to pick a lane as opposed to just pirouette to the outside and just hope that he could turn the corner. That's been very different for Josh this season. I don't think the offensive line gets credit for that pocket integrity like that. That is by design. That is how it's designed, and I just don't think they get enough credit for that. And it's a shame, because that's not the way it should be.
Yeah, with a lot of the attention going to Detroit's line. Look what they're able to do. Oh, my God. Okay, phenomenal. Well, you got a line that, with the exception of Mitch Morse, played together for 2 years straight. which is unheard of in this, this NFL. There's always guys that get banged up or dinged up, or they have something, this and that, or there's a falling off of talent wise. But Cromer, week in, week out, gets these boys ready to play. And it could be something where a design in the scheme, it could be how they're deciding to run stuff at practice, and how the number twos are starting to give them looks at practice and how successful they're able to do it. But for one reason or another, we cannot be remiss and not mention the offensive line of the Buffalo Bills and how it's connected to the Buffalo Bills scoring over 500 points.
Yeah.
How closely related it is to them scoring over 500 points this year. But yeah, I mean, Paul, which leads into the fact of Josh Allen and having a career year, taking care of the ball, running the ball, throwing the ball, giving us highlight plays, being the first to do this, that, and the third. Seems like every week, the first player scores 6 touchdowns with no turnovers and lose the game. That's one of the worst ones. But in that, people are starting to post and put things on, Twitter and whatnot and all this other stuff to give their narrative of why other players should get the MVP. I unfortunately, I'm mad at myself. The graphic that I made for this is I left Saquon Barkley off of it because I really think he should have went for Dickerson's record. I really think he should have, because Dickerson to me is turning into, God rest his soul, Mercury Morris when it comes to his record. Like, he doesn't want anybody to break it. He says if it's done in 17 games, it doesn't mean nothing. Like, stop.
Whatever, stop, dude. Like, he broke OJ's record with an extra game. I don't want to hear that nonsense.
He played 16. Remember, it went from 14 to 16. So it's like, dude, you had 2 extra games. You broke OJ's. Okay, let's stop it. But the point being is, I should have put Saquon on the graphic, but I put Darnold, Goff, Allen, Burrow, and Jackson. And I think that there are other guys that should be considered given how the award was given in the past. Now, we touched on this briefly last week, Paul, but I just want to get your thoughts again. Allen not playing today, obviously heard him from a statistical standpoint, and people have brought up he has not played 11 quarters this year.
Yeah.
3 games this guy has not played, which I will say this for those historians out there. Terrell Davis, when he broke 2,000 yards for the Broncos in 98, I think it was, he sat out 8. You don't think he would have broke Dickerson's record and absolutely shattered it? Like, there were like second halves of games that he sat out of when he had like 138 at halftime and stuff like that. But anyway, that notwithstanding, I know Allen's got hurt from a statistical standpoint. Did he do enough this year defeating the Chiefs, defeating the Lions in his overall play to capture an MVP award?
I think the narrative before the season, because remember, the narrative is super important here, right? The narrative was Buffalo might not win their division this year.
Yep.
And they had it won by what, week 10?
At beginning of December.
Yeah. Like, so, but the narrative was Miami is going to dominate that division. The Jets with Aaron Rodgers will race for the division, and Buffalo didn't do enough to stay competitive. That was the narrative before the season. And the people who were making that argument are the people who get to vote on MVP. So, like, I feel like a lot of this is, kind of conjecture, and you kind of look in the rear view, but go back and listen to what the people who vote on the MVP were saying about the Bills before the season. And then look at where they are. And it feels like a slam dunk to me, just because giving it to Saquon would be such a, like, you didn't give it to McCaffrey last year, and San Francisco went without McCaffrey this season, and look at what happened to that team.
Yeah, but you can't base the award on that. Honestly, we know if, it's really tough, because then does that make the award whoever does the most with less? Like, whoever has the least amount of talent and does the best, they give them the
isn't that
award.
part of the decision-making process, though?
I
These
think
are
it should
sports
be.
writers that vote on this.
I think statistics should be involved in it. I also think that wins are not a quarterback stat. So my voting is going to be skewed toward Joe Burrow. Because I think you talk about a guy who, Allen lost his number one wide receiver. He had a bunch of new parts put into the offense. The line was still there, though. I mean, that's one of the arguments that Allen's going to have against him, is that line came back. 4 out of those 5 starters came back in the same position that they were in. Well, with the exception of McGovern. But, I mean, I digress. The point is, you had Josh Allen coming into the season, like you said. A lot of people were talking about, oh, they're not going to win this, they're not going to win that. They're going to. So if you take Josh Allen off of the Buffalo Bills, they don't win 3 games. I don't care who you got in there.
Right.
But is that the thing you want to do? I mean, are wins going to be a part of this? Are they? Because you talk about Allen not doing much with less, but then you got Joe Burrow, doesn't even have a defense. He's got Chase, he's got Higgins. I understand that, but he doesn't have a defense.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge collection of people that, like, if you said Chase Brown was going to run for almost 1,000 yards for the Bengals, they would have laughed at you, right? Like, they would have laughed at you. With that being said, if this offense was Jamar Chase and T. Higgins the last 4 weeks of the season, like, Jamar Chase had 1,700 yards receiving this year. That's crazy town. It's 17 touchdowns. That's crazy. Now, I understand you can make the argument that is solely because of Burrow, but Jamar Chase had almost double the next closest receiver on his team. And T. Higgins will be the best paid wide receiver this offseason.
No doubt.
He's going to hit free agency, and T. Higgins is going to make a fortune in the free agent market, having half the yards that Jamar Chase had this season.
73 catches, 10 touchdowns.
Yeah. But, I mean, Jamar Chase on, 50 more receptions just about? He had like 100 and... Did he have 125? He had 120. He had, so I think, below 130 receptions with 1,700 plus yards.
Yep.
That's
127.
crazy.
That's crazy. And Higgins can get a bag, but here's the thing. Is he a number one? That's the thing. I mean, that's the thing that whoever's going for T. Higgins has to realize, something that has happened a lot in the 90s, a lot in the 2000s. When you want to take the number 2 wide receiver off of a team, you have to remember he wasn't the guy. So what is going to happen when he does become the guy? I mean, not everybody.
He's going to be paid to be the guy. There's no doubt about it.
Not everybody is Stephon Diggs, though. I mean, remember, people forget Diggs was a 2 in Minnesota. People don't realize that. He was behind Adam Thielen. Anybody wants to tell you different, go look at the statistics and go look at the the game plans and things that were going on. Diggs was the number 2 wide receiver there. Buffalo Bills thought he was a 1, and they paid him accordingly as a 1, and he proved to be a 1. That rarely happens in the NFL, guys. Higgins is a bona fide.
I love this from Spin. Higgins is going to be bona fide number 1 for the Pats. You know what? Thrilled the Pats are not going to get the number 1 overall pick, right? Because understand, teams that don't have a need at quarterback, and I really don't know if the Patriots believe that they have a need at quarterback or not. They just fired their head coach, so hard to know whether they believe that they need a quarterback, because they're going to have a wholesale change there. I would be shocked if they don't fire their general manager as well. Player personnel guys, like it's all going to roll downhill, but maybe they roll with the front office. It is not common for general managers to get fired after the season. They normally get fired after the draft. We saw that happen in Buffalo with Doug Whaley, finished the draft, fire the GM after that. So I don't know if they know that they have a quarterback problem, but having the number 1 overall pick when you don't have a quarterback issue lets franchises completely rake the next few drafts, because they will get so much for that first overall pick. And they still will get a lot for the pick that they have. They still will get a ton of resources for that, because quarterback needy teams will pay multiple years worth of drafts to get in at that spot, right? So they will make a fortune there. And I would love to see them spend their money on T. Higgins. I would love that, because I'm not a Drake May believer. I'm not. I don't think that's it for them.
How about Milton?
I don't know if they think that, but I guess we'll find out.
How about Milton?
I don't think
that boy looked good today.
The Bills did a great job of making a quarterback controversy in New England. That played out real well.
The guy's 6'5", 250 did a backflip in the end zone. Wow. I can't with that. Okay, so Paul, we're going all these rabbit holes we go down because we both got ADD. That sucks. We were talking about Joe Burrow, we're talking about T. Higgins, and then we just trail off into the Patriots. It's so great. But going into it, I said last week I would give it to Burrow because if we're going on statistics, 43 touchdowns, 9 picks, 4,900 yards, the most completions, most attempts this year, is not going to make the playoffs. So to your point, which you said last week, to credit you, can you win an MVP if you don't make the playoffs? Mm-hmm. I will 100% agree with you that in today's NFL, you have to have not only not make the playoffs, you have to have the best record in the league, which is why
the standard, right?
And Mahomes isn't getting mentioned at all. Not that he should. I think this is one of those years where they know that Mahomes isn't having one of those star-studded years that goes along with his record, and he's getting a lot of help. So you can't give it to him. Okay. Would it be wise to give it to Lamar Jackson? I would not be in disagreement with giving it to Lamar at all. For the stats that he has put up, unless, ladies and gentlemen, unless you also have Derrick Henry in the top 10 of players in the NFL this year. If you have Derrick Henry up there as one of the 10 best players, not just quarterbacks, players in the NFL that had an impact on their team, then you can't vote for Lamar. And here's the craziest thing. RG3 said this. He said Derrick Henry just had the easiest 1,900 yards of his career.
Yeah.
Listen, you can have an easy game. You can have an easy play. You can have an easy half. 1,900 yards is easy. For a guy who played this game, RG3, I can't believe that he would utter something so stupid. Because here's what I said. Here's what I said in my head, and I'll get to the chat in a second. Here's what I said. Okay, one guy, he said that Lamar made Henry's life easier, not the other way around. And I'm sitting there going, how could you? Henry has rushed for 2,000 yards before. He has rushed for over 1,700 yards. He has rushed for double-digit touchdowns. He's done this before. Lamar just had his first 4,000-yard passing season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who had an impact on who now? Mm-hmm. Who had more of an impact on who? The amount of times I watched a Baltimore Ravens game and I saw an 8-man box playing man, and all you got to do is beat one guy, and all you got to do is put it up to that one guy. Mm-hmm. And the number of touchdowns 17 touchdowns he had within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, inside the 10, he had 17 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. 17 touchdown passes. Give half of those to Henry. How's the MVP look now? You know what I mean? If Henry would have rushed for 20 touchdowns and 2,000 yards, we're not even having this discussion. Give it to Henry.
Right. Yeah.
All day.
Well, I think, again, if the part about Derrick Henry, and I know the chat is, I'm sure, saying we should have paid Derrick Henry. He's a phenomenal player. So let's just put that on the board. Phenomenal player. And I think he was only a fit for certain franchises. And here's why I say that. The argument could be made that Derrick Henry was a difference maker for Baltimore. Clearly he was with the season that he had, right? Yes. He scored 8, 10, 11 rushing touchdowns. How many of those were when Baltimore was behind? Do you know? So 11 rushing touchdowns. How many of those when Baltimore was behind?
He only had 11?
Yeah, I think
I thought he had 16.
Don't think so. Hold on. Let me look.
You're talking about...
he did have 16. Oh, geez.
You already gave me the answer, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I was looking at the wrong column on Pro Football Reference. Still, it's fine. So he had 16. So how many of those touchdowns were when they were behind?
8.
3.
Really? So either they're not behind a lot.
I mean,
are you making the case for Lamar?
They didn't win every game they played. They were trailing games. So anytime they were trailing, right? Now, again, from
Yeah.
They were ahead an awful lot in football games. So again, you're going to put that out on the table. But the fact of the matter is that he scored 7 touchdowns while they were leading, 6 touchdowns while tied, which likely was, initial scores, initial drives, right, to put them in the lead. But Derrick Henry, when Baltimore is losing a game by less than or by more than 1 score, Derrick Henry's not on the field.
Oh, okay.
Like that. If you go back and watch Baltimore games, that's the truth. If they're down by more than 7 points, Derrick Henry's not on the field. So you have to take the good with the bad with Derrick Henry. He is great to get a lead and continue to maintain a lead to control the clock, right? That is what he's really good at. He's really good at maintaining possessions. I don't think Buffalo's in that game, right? I don't know. I don't think Buffalo's really in that game. So did Buffalo need Derrick Henry? James Cook ran for 16 touchdowns this year.
Yeah.
It's not an argument to me.
No.
Right?
It's not.
It's not.
With the cost that went into it.
You pay Henry, you don't get Cooper, you
can't
pay Henry, you can't resign, you can't even consider resigning Rousseau. You probably can't afford Douglas, to be honest with you. You got to start trimming hairs at some point. You likely can't sign Epinesa. One of these falls off the table, right? One of those players falls off the table. And while you can say, well, Epinesa, wasn't great this season,
extend
it's
Brown.
Revisionist history. You're looking at knowing what he did this season. You had to make this decision 12 months ago, right? So that's what I mean. It's kind of revisionist history to me to say we should have signed Derrick Henry. James Cook set a franchise record in touchdowns this year, rushing touchdowns this year. I'm good. Yeah. I'm fine there. And with the money you pay James Cook, I'm fine there. And with the players you're able to retain because you didn't go out and sign Henry, and the player you were able to go acquire because again you weren't behind the salary 8 ball. I'm good there. I'm fine. You're not rolling a lot of money into next season. You didn't have a lot of money to work with at the whole start of it. This is the position that you chose to put yourself in with the contract extensions to Spencer Brown, with the restructures to Deion Dawkins, and the constant restructures to Matt Milano. This is the boat you put yourself in. Henry wasn't really ever an option. So, it's just one of those circumstances. I don't want to franchise my season on Derrick Henry. I wouldn't have ever done that. So, and the return you got on James Cook, I mean, come on, you can't argue those returns. You can't. James Cook is admittedly just a better fit in this offense, as I think Joe Brady has shown that. Derrick Henry, phenomenal athlete. Not saying that he doesn't deserve to be on the Bills. He certainly would have worked, and they would have figured out what to do with them. The fact of the matter is that when Baltimore was losing football games, he wasn't helping.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't on the field.
Well, the craziest part about this, Paul, that I find very, very interesting is that the MVP race for me started to take hold or take shape around Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
The craziest part was that as of roughly November 17th, Derrick Henry had 13 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Do you know what he had for the final 6 weeks?
Well, I mean, 3.
Yeah. So do you find it interesting that he only had 3 right when the talks at the MVP started to heat up even more?
Oh, that's interesting.
This guy had 13 rushing touchdowns and 2 receiving touchdowns in 11 games.
Yeah, that's it. That is an interesting conversation.
So right when it started to take hold, he didn't have another receiving touchdown and only got 3, and 2 of them were in the last game of the season against Cleveland.
Yeah, but Mar, his total number of rushing attempts was right where they actually had more rushing attempts in the month of December than he did any other month. He averaged 114 yards per game.
They played the Giants in Houston and beat them both they both dropped 30 on both of them.
You can't, you're making 2 sides of an argument, Mark.
No, I think it's interesting that right when the MVP talk started to heat up to a fever pitch, a guy who had, 2 receiving touchdowns and 13 rushing touchdowns for you in 11 games goes 4 games straight with nothing. How does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
How does that? And in 2 of those games, you give him less than 20 carries when he's been your bell cow. What happens now? What happened What happened to Lamar Jackson in those games? I know the Giant game, he threw 5 touchdowns. Weird, huh? Did you know that 3 of those 5 came within the 10-yard line? Shocking. So all this stat padding nonsense that people like to bestow on Josh Allen for having 1-yard rushing touchdowns, kiss my ass. You want to talk about he threw 5 touchdowns against the Giants. I could throw 3 against the Giants. Kiss my ass. Paul could throw 3 as well. He averages over 5 yards a carry. His average this year is better than his 2,000-yard season. He's averaging
again in the month of December. He averaged 5.4 yards per carry in the month of December.
That's the one thing that you really wanted to find out, though. That's the interesting part. Remember when #Nation 43 of you are in here. Listen, Paul was talking about trying to go find winter tape on Derrick Henry and see how good his snow tires were.
We couldn't
find any.
There's not. Yeah. Cold weather football is not a thing for Derrick Henry. So this is uncharted territory.
I know.
And now, mind you, right? Is his December drop in score a concern? No, I don't think so. Right. I think there's a fun, Illuminati sort of, conspiracy theory behind his scoring potential in the month of December when you start looking at an MVP race. I think that's fun, right? You start sprinkling the conspiracy theory, argument on that. I think that's fun. But from a usage perspective, right, the numbers show that while he was averaging his second lowest month in yards per carry, he was still averaging almost 5.5 yards per carry. So
I think he answered that question.
Yeah, I think he did. Right. I think he did. Yeah. I wasn't sure if cold weather Derrick Henry would be reliable, and apparently homeboy had some snow tires in the garage. He's fine in December. He was fine in January. So, yeah. Busted out those radials. Put chains on those tires.
Yep. Something that the mainstream media will not tell you. They like doing all this other stuff about.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, they like doing all this other stuff about, he had total touchdowns. Well, they always do total touchdowns for Josh Allen because he has those 1-yard things. Guys, if you add the fumbles, Jackson has more turnovers than Allen. But they won't tell you that. Mm-hmm. Just letting you know. Mm-hmm. So anytime someone wants to bring that argument to you, just bring that back to them. That's fun.
Yeah, that's
thanks to what's his name? Paul Berg for reminding me of that statistic. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
That is a good one.
That's a good one.
Okay, now outside looking in, Goff and Darnold, did they have any kind of an argument?
No, Goff's out. No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the team is too strong around him, so he has the opposite argument of Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and Darnold, had he missed last season due to an injury, he'd be up for comeback player of the year. But that's not how they do that award anymore. I think Darnold falls out of the MVP race. As great a story as it is, if this were a more storied franchise than Minnesota, if it were Dallas. Let's talk about that for a second, right?
That's a great point.
Dallas, Darnold's probably more than a dark horse in the MVP race, right? But it's not. It didn't happen in Dallas. It didn't happen in one of those franchises. It happened in Minnesota, right? Like if it happened, like if it was the Jaguars, right? Different story, right? If it's Dallas, different story. Like I think the location there matters. It's Minnesota. I just don't think that's got the juice to beat out Saquon for MVP, right?
That's weird. That's so weird, though, that because of it's Minnesota. But I think that's an interesting point. Another interesting point is that Sam Darnold this year for the Minnesota Vikings has won 14 games. He won 13 total in New York in 3 years. What you guys know?
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
But, I mean, completing 68% of his passes, over 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns. Are they taking too much? See, here's the craziest part about Darnold. Guy's 14-2. He has, you can argue it, he has his own version of Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But they're winning games. I mean, obviously, I think it's a slam dunk. Kevin O'Connell gets the coach of the year. I think he's going to get it.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Jordan Addison, the last 6 weeks of the season, actually turned into a compliment, like a very, 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 very compliment-based receiver to Justin Jefferson. Like Addison, the last 6 weeks was hard to beat. He was a matchup nightmare.
He was a dominant force on my 5th place winning fantasy team. That being said, can we give a round of applause? Can we give him a Sean? See, you always do this. I'm gonna do it to you now. Can we give a Sean McDermott clap to the class of 2018 quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, relevant now, right? Look at that.
Baker, all 4 in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, all showing out. And my brother even said this to me the other day. I mean, this is sidebar. Sam Darnold, Geno Smith doing well. Do the Jets just ruin quarterbacks at this point? I mean, is that really what's going on at this point? Just this juncture? No, but 4 out of the 5 first-round quarterbacks that were taken. I think Rosen's selling insurance somewhere in Nevada. I think I'm not really sure where he is. Poor Rosen.
Josh Rosen.
Poor Rosen. Poor guy.
Poor Josh Rosen.
I'm going to let everybody know that they made 9 mistakes before me. Okay. All right, good. But no, I mean, even Baker's having a freaking phenomenal year. Over 4,000 yards, close to 40 touchdowns himself.
Yeah. And Baker got Mike Evans, that last reception, last play of the game, for a $3 million bonus.
That was awesome. I love that. He spiked the ball. I got so happy about that. Now, Paul, is that the likely to be earned and not likely to be earned?
I'm so proud of you for asking that question. I was just about to bring that up. So the way that works is that was an unlikely to be earned incentive. So how that's determined is player incentives are based off the previous year's production, right? So like, just as an example, let's say a player has 100 receptions for a bonus, right? If they had 98 receptions the season before, the bonus money associated with 100 receptions, even though it is likely that they'll get close, that money isn't counted towards the salary cap. He didn't hit that statistical marker last year, so that is unlikely to be earned. Money that is earned that was originally unlikely to be earned comes off next year's salary cap. So that $3 million this year that he's going to get paid is going to come off their next year's salary cap. And it also, if he has the exact same incentive next year, also becomes a likely to be earned incentive. And now that does count against the salary cap. So let's just imagine for a moment that he has the same incentive next season. That's going to cost them $6 million against the salary cap. The $3 million he was already paid for this one, and the $3 million he would be owed if that incentive is the same next season.
So proud of you. Which is crazy because how is a guy? No, maybe you could explain this to me. How is a guy who for 10 straight seasons had 1,000 yards receiving not likely to get 1,000 yards receiving in his 11th season?
I know, right?
We're going to put this as not likely to be earned because you're not tying Jerry. Oh, yes, he is. Oh, my God. That's phenomenal.
That's
okay.
funny.
So, I mean, we made a case for Darnold. Obviously, if he played somewhere else, having a 14-2 record is phenomenal. What he's been able to do, essentially play, Kevin O'Connell essentially playing with house money because you do have JJ McCarthy sitting there. What are you going to do next year? Where's Darnold going to go? I think the perfect place for Darnold would probably be stay in the NFC somewhere because the AFC is just going to be too crazy at this point. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we talked about Jared Goff being not so much propped up by his supporting cast, but when you win a game and you drop 50 and you don't even have any passing touchdowns, that just tells you how good the team is around you. Mm-hmm. I think that happened once this year. I could be chat. Correct me on that if I'm wrong. So then we come down to the final 3. Joe Burrow doesn't even make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. You can't. What would you do to the award if a guy who didn't make the playoffs wins the MVP?
I mean,
how valuable are you? You know what I mean?
I don't know. Like Burrow was unbelievable the last half of the season.
Oh yeah.
Like, is it enough to forget the first half of the season happened? Right. Like, I do think you have to. It's interesting, right? Because with Burrow, we talk about the last half of the season like it's it was his standard the whole season, and it wasn't. He played like dog water the first half of the season. That team was awful. And I think we forget the same thing with Lamar. Baltimore was really rough at the beginning of the season, whereas Buffalo had sustained success the entirety of the season. So at what point is it about the entire season and not just excluding whole sections of your schedule, right? And I think that's part of the argument is, are you going to look at it as all 17 games, or are you going to say, yes, they were really bad at one point, but look at all they overcame. They overcame the mountain they built in front of themselves. Like, that's what happened. That's what they did. They put themselves in a bad position because they played like crap. So are you going to award Joe Burrow for being in a bad situation, and being part of the reason they were put there? Like, come on. Like that's where the argument to me kind of falls apart a bit, Mar. Is you look at the season as a whole, you have to look at it week by week. I don't think you can look at it as just, the most recent history. Although I understand that a lot of these end of season awards feel like just the end of the season is all that's considered, and I think as fans, that's something that's really hard for us.
Yeah. Well, I'm about to throw a wrench in a little bit of your theory, Paul, because I know Cincinnati as a team started the season pretty awful, 3-4.
Yeah.
Burrow had a 15-2 touchdown to interception ratio at that point.
Yeah.
Over 70% completion percentage. So at the beginning of the season start, you really couldn't put it on him. I mean, they actually had 3 losses in a row, Baltimore, Chargers, and Pittsburgh, in which the guy threw 10 touchdowns to 1 pick and couldn't get any help.
Right.
He's lost 35-34, 34-27, 44-38. Like, how is that on him? Isn't that the craziest part? Like, he definitely, what he did near the end of the season started to get highlighted more. I know that. But, like, you lose to Baltimore 41-38, and you lose to them 35-34. You threw 9 touchdowns to 1 interception in those games. You literally could not have done any more in those games yourself to win those games. And you win those 2 games, what happens to your season? I mean, we're talking about 3 teams from the North getting in the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, it's absolutely insane. So
we got to address a comment real quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, we're good. Lamar had only 1 more turnover than Josh, but Lamar had more passing TDs, rushing yards, higher completion percentage, higher yards per attempt. Need I go on? We talked about this at the beginning of the broadcast. The difference in total number of snaps is I think something that is easy to forget is a thing.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar played 100 more snaps.
Equivalent of what? Easy. Well, I mean, I don't think we're considering today either, right? Like, we're not considering the fact that Josh didn't play today. He didn't count for today. So,
well, I mean, if you want to go by
basically,
quarters,
Lamar probably played like 150 more snaps than Josh.
Yeah, you're talking about 11.
And that's
quarters.
A lot. That's like 3 games. That's 3 games worth of snaps.
Now, if you want to take into account and go by that statistic and say, hey, listen, divide Allen's by 14 and then divide Lamar's by 17 and see what happens. One telling sign that was very interesting was the fact that Baltimore had an 18-point lead on Cleveland yesterday, and he was still in the game.
Yeah.
Very weird, right? It was interesting. Like, you're up 21-3. Why is Lamar Jackson still in the game? Zay Flowers almost got taken out for the season. Hamilton almost got taken out for the season.
Lamar was in the game for a long time, even when they were easily beating Buffalo, right? Like, they handed it to Buffalo pretty bad. And Lamar was in the game for quite some time into that game. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He sat out. Stop the cap says again. He says, so what? He sat out the Bills in the 4th quarter. Yeah. So did Allen.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
Like, Allen could have just had mop up. He probably would have got 50, 60 more passing yards. You know what I mean? And you add those in. You add that Mitchell Trubisky played a significant amount of snaps, and so did Mike White, especially today. So you think about teams roughly, on average, run 50 to 65 plays, offensive plays in a game, roughly in there. So if you're talking about snaps, just pure snaps with like 100, maybe 125. You said, Paul, like 125 or something. Like
I
that?
would imagine it to be
You're
somewhere
talking,
around, without looking at the numbers for today, right? I
yeah.
would imagine it to be
What's the
close to
equivalent of 2
150.
games? Let Allen play 2 more games and see what the statistics are then. You know what I
But
mean? It was very interesting.
To that piece, though, right? Because the other side of that argument is, remember when EJ Manuel was in like his 3rd season, he still hadn't played a full 16 games yet. Like, remember that argument? Like, oh, he's still in his rookie season.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
He's nearing the end of his drafted contract. You're like, oh, he still hasn't played a full season yet. You know, like the point is that there's more of an argument than just total number of statistics, right? Like, and some people are going to believe that, and some people are going to say, well, that's nonsense. The fact of the matter is, if you want it to be about the numbers should be at least comparable, from an overall average perspective. And with Lamar and Josh, they're not. So you just have to figure out how much value you want to put on that. If you want to believe that Lamar is the MVP, he's got a couple already. Now, those earlier MVPs may hurt his chance to win a 3rd because, again, sports writers vote on these things. So, his MVP last season, he played better this season statistically, right? But the fact of the matter is that MVP last year may be a reason he doesn't get it this year, because somebody's going to say, listen, I know he had a better season, but he won it last year. So like, that's how sports writers think. It's just the reality of the situation. So if you want to say Lamar had a better season than Allen, that's fine. I hope they get to settle that in the playoffs.
So I just want to go over this comment real quick. Can you explain why 150 snaps is significant? Okay, let's say 150 snaps is the equivalent of 3 games, offensive snaps. Mm-hmm. Okay. Allen currently is averaging 233 yards a game. Okay. Mm-hmm. He has 3,700 yards right now. If you take that 233, that becomes 700 yards over 3 games. Okay. Now he has 4,400 passing yards. Okay. You take his touchdowns. They're currently at 28. He has probably, maybe you think about 6 more, because he was averaging roughly almost 2 a game. So he has 34 passing touchdowns, let's say 7 picks, 12 rushing touchdowns, will put him at 46 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 4,600 yards, or 4,300 yards passing. Where does the discussion go then? If he was able to play an equivalent of 3 more games, because they blew out teams so badly that he was able to sit on the sideline, and Baltimore was in so many of those games that Lamar didn't get a chance to sit on the sideline. So that's why the snaps were vastly different. So that's what you have to take into account if you just want to be a stats-based award. Okay. Mm-hmm. The one stat that I thought was very, very telling, and I think this is the case for Jared Goff and Allen in that respect. Lamar might be in there too. I don't know. But they said that the Buffalo Bills averaged 3 points per drive going into this game. Oh. They were averaging 3 points per drive. The only other teams to do that was the 2007 Patriots, the 2000 Rams. Who else averaged a bunch of points? But I mean, they did like 3 or 4 teams, and they were the 2018 Kansas City Chiefs, and the quarterbacks for all of those teams won the MVP. So it was one of those things where, from a historical standpoint, averaging 3 points per drive for the entire season is absolutely crazy. Insane. Is absolutely crazy. Insane.
Yeah, that's a crazy statistic.
Yeah, like I know.
Again, there's no way to know what the sports writers are going to value, right? Because it's not like there's one player who had a completely dominant season and it was head and shoulders above every other player. Look at what Saquon did this year, but you have to look at the running back history with the MVP award and say, this has for the last 20 years perennially been a quarterback award. And perennially it goes to the quarterback with the best record.
Okay. Yeah. Stop the cap coming in. Y'all play the AFC East. You get to play the Jags, Titans, other below 500 teams. Of course, you get to sit out. Ravens had the hardest schedule in the league. Technically, at the start of the league, because you're a division, you guys know this, because you're a division winner, you play these first place teams of other divisions other than your own.
Yeah.
So does your comment there mean that nobody from the AFC South or the NFC South can ever be considered because they play in weaker divisions? Like, people had the Jets going to the playoffs. People had Miami winning the division. Things happened throughout the season. The fact that the Buffalo Bills were able to defeat arguably the number one seed in both conferences, I think trumps the fact that they didn't have a traditionally a weaker. They had a traditionally weaker division, and I understand that. But nobody's taking championships or MVPs away from Tom Brady when the AFC East was the weakest division, and he was going 6-0 every year in the East. And but nobody's taking anything away from him because he had that.
Right.
So why is it a discussion now? Like, I don't understand. I understand the strength of the AFC West. I understand the strength of the AFC North. Mm-hmm. But to go by strength of schedule now, are we in college? Like, I don't understand why that's a thing. All of a sudden.
Exactly. And you could go in and look to say, well, the Bills lost to the Ravens during the season. Bills lost to the Texans. They lost, the Baltimore lost to the Raiders and the Browns. Like,
see, I didn't want
not an equal argument. That's what I'm saying, right? Is you could go back and look and say, well, in looking at everything through a college lens, right, where you don't play that many games, you have to compare your losses and the quality of team that you lost to in college, again, because you don't have that many games and there's so many teams. It's the fairest way to do it. In the NFL, you don't have that. The greatest equalizer is the playoffs. Yeah, that's the great equalizer.
The three loss. Yeah, I know, and I didn't want to bring it up. Like, I did. Yeah. I tried so hard in my response because I don't want to be that guy. Yeah, I tried so hard in my response not to bring up the Browns or the Raiders. But I think in the chat, it got thrown in there and all this other stuff. The three teams that the Buffalo Bills have lost to are in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Do I remember 35-10? Yeah, I remember doing the post game, and it sucked.
Yeah, sure did.
It was awful. Like, to watch Derrick Henry completely after that 87-yard run, I wanted to turn it off because I was like, I already know how this game's going to go. 4 defensive starters out. They're going to be peppering it, all this other stuff. And, for stop the cat, I love the back and forth we're having in this discussion and what's going on. But I'm just going to tell you, want to talk about losses. The three teams that the Bills lost to are all going to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. They may have played a weaker schedule. Okay, they lost to these three teams. If you want to count losses, which I don't want to for a quarterback statistic, because there are games that Lamar plays out of his mind and Baltimore loses. You have to know that. That's what happens with Allen. You know what I mean? He was 9 of 30 in that Houston game. Nobody's going to mention how he didn't have his number one wide receiver. Mm-hmm. He didn't have Shakir as well. Nobody could get open on that defense. It was, if the Bills played the Houston Texans the same time Baltimore played them with the 31-2 like shellacking, Bills kill them. Bills absolutely mollywop Houston because it was a completely different team at that point. Literally a completely different team.
Yeah. Yep. Hey,
only 10 points.
It's one of those conversations that hopefully we get to continue through the playoffs, right? Because the fact of the matter is, in an ideal world, right, these teams meet in the playoffs at some point. I think that settles the argument. But the downside is the MVP voting will already be done, right? Like that will already have happened. It doesn't happen after the playoffs. It happens once the regular season concludes. So the MVP award may not be indicative of the playoff results. That's okay, right? That's not what that award's supposed to do, right? That's not what that award is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be, it's not supposed to be based off not supposed to be based off playoff performance. That's fine. That's the way that the award's designed.
Yeah, that's fine. Only 10 points with the MVP.
Yeah,
I like this. This is fun.
I know. Yeah, I know it is.
We don't usually get roasted like that. Well, I mean, speaking of roast, we're not going to have a roast because the Bills didn't win.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. That's true.
But okay, final thoughts, really quick, Paul.
Yeah.
Who's your MVP? Josh Allen? Hasn't changed?
Yeah, it's got to be, right? You look at the receiver totals, right? You look at the total offense production. Ray Davis is an integral part of this offense. I think post draft, like I was disappointed with the Ray Davis pick when it came draft time. I was disappointed with the Keon Coleman pick. And again, in a rookie bubble, right? I think you've gotten a return from there more so than you got with Kaiir Elam, who was a first round pick, in prior years. And then you look at Shakir being your number one, you add Amari Cooper, who again, there's not a ton of tape on in a Bills uniform, be that good or bad. I think, like Curtis Samuel has been overall a disappointment for you at the receiver position. I think Kincaid has really been a disappointment for you, again, because he's had some injuries this season that has kind of hurt that productivity. Dawson Knox as occasionally relevant, which is fine that he remains to be an occasional part of this offense. But, the truth of the matter is people are afraid of playing Josh Allen because he can be total chaos at the quarterback position. And he doesn't necessarily do it. Through the air. And this offensive line is amongst the best in the NFL. And I don't know if they get the appreciation that they deserve. Josh has been, again, playing with a broken left hand for a vast majority of the season. So kudos to Josh on that. Should that be something that you consider when voting for the MVP? Probably. Right. At some point, like it's sports writers, they love to tell stories, that I think that does play into the narrative of, whether Josh is an MVP candidate or not. That's adversity that you can't say the other quarterbacks have gone through in recent years. Yeah. And, is he helped? Nobody's talking about how Josh Allen is being propped up because James Cook scored 16 rushing touchdowns this year. And I don't think you can make that argument about other teams or franchises who have players that are in the MVP race. So, it's got to be Josh. Are you still with Burrow?
I had Burrow because if you were going to make it just strictly a stats-based award, I don't think you're talking about a quarterback. Now, here's the thing. First of all, G-Rock, you're the man. Happy New Year's to you as well. I'm gonna leave that on the screen as we close out the episode. I can't ignore historical significance because you know how I am when it comes to the history of the game. You had a guy who had the second highest passer rating. You had a guy who had a 41-4 touchdown to interception ratio, threw for over 4,000 yards, first time in his career, almost had 1,000 yards rushing. But then if I look at that and I say, first time 4,000 yards and over 800 yards rushing, first time a quarterback's ever done that. Josh did it twice with 750 yards rushing at 4,000 yards. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to make a case based on previous MVPs, it's tough because all of Lamar's stats this year blow all of his stats out of the water from last year. Yeah. So you can't compare it to previous years.
Right.
So I am going to give it to Saquon Barkley. Because I can't ignore the impact that Henry had on Lamar. I just can't do it. And you took my other horse out of the race with Burrow not making the playoffs. You're already picking Allen. Yeah. I have to pick somebody else. And I know it'll annoy the crap out of Stop the Cap and Right There. It's going to annoy both of them. So I'm going to pick Saquon Barkley for my pick.
People should not be shocked that Barkley sat out the game, this last game, because he could have set a career high in rushing yards earlier in the season. In a game, and he had like 13 yards left. He's like, "No, I'm not playing. No, and the credit to the head coach is like, I watched it again. He goes, "No, I'm good. I don't need it. I'm good." So it should not be a shock that he sat out today. Now, is that something that could hurt his MVP chances? I don't really think he cares. I don't think he cares.
No, he doesn't. And the running back, the offensive. Now, we forgot to mention one thing. I just want to mention real quick, and then we'll be out of here, guys. Make sure description of the video, Mr. Rogers Holmes brochure is in there. We're on all socials at HTech Sports. The year that Cup won the Triple Crown and didn't win it, I thought it's a quarterback award. Was he the offensive player of the year that year? Did Cup get offensive player of the year? I'm pretty sure he did, because that's what they do. The guy that should get the MVP that's not a quarterback, they'll say, we'll just give him the offensive player of the year. Here's
exactly what
CMC.
happens,
Here's
100%.
Saquon. Here Cup. Here's what. Have fun, guys.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But guys, thanks for joining us. Obviously, it wasn't a post game, but it was a live talk about the MVP, talking about facing Denver. If you want any of that, once again, just rewind it to the beginning and listen to it again. Paul and I are going to be doing some other stuff in preparation for the playoffs, so stay tuned as far as that goes. For
Mark,
all the good back and forth that we had, what's up?
Well, I have to ask you because I'm just noticing this. Do you have like wrist braces on? Is that like for
No, they're
carpal
part of the
tunnel?
shirt. They're part of the shirt.
It's part of the shirt.
Yeah.
So do you like
it's a thermal shirt?
Okay, so are you like into e-girls or i-ladies?
I'm not going to answer that question because you already know after 12 years. we're out of here. See you later, guys.
Hello, fellow Bills fans. Sean Rogers, realtor and lead of the Mr. Rogers Homes team. Did you know that real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth, and right now is one of the best times to own an investment property in Arizona? Please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions so we can take the next step to your financial freedom here in the Valley of the Sun, utilizing real estate. As always, God bless America and go Buffalo.